Hello everyone, I'm Ian from Headstock Distribution and we represent Zildjian in the UK and Ireland, and I'm here with the amazing Steve White.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
Pleasure, man, pleasure. So now you're up here to do something a little bit different today. We're going to go and pick some cymbals for you in a minute, but I wanted to just talk to you about the evolution of Steve White's sound over the years.
Yeah.
Do you remember your first set of cymbals?
I do remember the first set of cymbals that I had, and I've still actually, the first significant set of cymbals, I still own the ride cymbal to that, which was an earth ride.
And the infamous earth ride.
The infamous earth ride. And I was, which I actually paid for. I bought it myself. I think I paid £69 for it, which was quite a while ago.
1947.
1947, yeah, 17 guineas and threepence. But no, it was, and I still got that cymbal, and believe it or not, I just used to kind of use it on absolutely everything. So when we were doing jazzy stuff in the Style Council, I used to use that. And then I got introduced to Colin Schofield, who eventually was working for Zildjian, and we struck up a relationship, and I began to get an education of what actually the different sounds were. I was very lucky at a very young age to go over to Boston and got to meet Lenny DiMuzio, and I got to hang with Armand and go to the factory with Armand Zildjian and just spend time around these absolute legends who genuinely would really give you the time of day when you visited the factory. And I remember going, probably it was like maybe 1984, and my name was up on the board.
Oh, yeah, nice.
And they had the Buddy Rich kit still there.
Yeah.
And it was like, Zildjian welcomes Steve White. And on that trip, I was given a 22-inch heavy what was called the EAK, the Early American K, which I still have. And I used that once I'd kind of realised that probably the Earth Ride wasn't the most versatile of cymbals. I used to have this 22-inch EAK, and I've still got that, and that was my kind of go-to cymbal from about 1985. I think I used that at Live Aid till probably 87, when I kind of finished with the Style Council live, did a few bits and pieces. But I've still got those cymbals, and I still also have, I was kindly gifted Bob Armstrong's dry custom ride that he taught so many amazing drummers on in his studio and his time teaching, and it's kind of you can see where the cymbal has kind of found its position on the stand, because there's one little patch that is completely worn from just incessant ding, ding, ga-ding, ding, ga-ding. And anyone that went to Bob will know exactly what I mean. So I still have that cymbal. But it was great because, being a young drummer thrust into this kind of really big band, there was a lot of learning to do.
Yeah.
And people like Colin and actually going across and meeting people like Lenny and was just an absolute education, because they gave us so much. As a younger player, they just gave us so much time.
When you say younger player, how old were you at that point?
I was 17 when I joined the Style Council. And then I went into 18, being 18 when I first played on my first sort of number 2 hit. We recorded in Paris when I was just going 17 into 18. And so I mean, basically I started the summer at school and finished the summer term being at school, left school and ended up sort of on Top of the Pops in the August.
Wow.
And then Top of the Pops was kind of we ended up on the Christmas special doing Long Hot Summer, and I was in and out of Top of the Pops for the next 2-3 years, on a fairly regular basis.
That's crazy. Yeah. So you brought up Live Aid, and it's something that I want to talk about, because I remember watching it.
Yeah.
And my dad was a huge Weller and Style Council fan.
Yeah.
So the very fact that I was watching you then,
Yeah,
and now I'm sat with you here.
You're about one, but
Yeah.
no, it was an incredible, and it is amazing because there's a lot of depending on when you're watching this, but there was a lot of there's a lot being spoken about Live Aid, and I'm really lucky on so many counts because I've got so many things that I'm so proud of doing, but I'm still doing stuff that I'm really proud of, and I don't consider myself one of these moaning old musicians going on about back in the day, can't stand that. So that event was put together with I believe a lot of love to actually try to do something different, which I think generally at that point and still today, it's musicians that put their sort of heads above the parapet to raise money. I mean, I'm not saying that footballers don't and racing car drivers don't. Everybody kind of does their own bit, but when it's about raising awareness, musicians are kind of a good bunch of people to do that. And a lot, I think with Live Aid, I don't think anybody really at the time knew how big it was going to be. And because we were there on the Friday, because we had a sound check, because we were one of the first bands to agree to do it. So we were allowed to go down. And I was there on the Friday, and I was on stage with John Weller, Paul's dad, and Paul was stood there just looking at this empty Wembley Stadium, and just going and Harvey Goldsmith, the promoter, just going, I have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. Because the tech was not, it was all are all these links to America, Philadelphia, are they going to work? He did not know. He had, he looked exhausted and he'd worked so hard along with his team, Pete Wilson and all of these guys that were all behind the scenes to make it happen. And I just think that on the day it went to a different level. Everybody could feel that this energy was unbelievable. And I remember getting to the stadium, and it was a beautiful hot July the 14th, a stunning day. It was like 84 degrees, and you could feel it. You could just feel this kind of something really in the air. It was quite amazing, quite emotional, quite magical. And it's interesting because, talking to my 14-year-old boys who have discovered music, and we went to see Pulp the other night at their insistence. It was a brilliant gig, but they wanted to go and see Pulp. And they're, one of my sons who's into guitar loves Ocean Colour Scene. He loves the stuff I did with Paul, which is really interesting that it's kind of, it's maintained such a transcendence, which is great. But, we were actually sat on an aeroplane going on holiday. And we were watching the Queen movie, which was an airplane version. It wasn't a lot of the more risque stuff, but it was an airplane version. And we were saying, my boy said, "So what was you doing on the day of this concert then, Dad?" I was there. and he kind of looked at me. Louis looked at me and he was like, "Really?" And it was like, yeah, so when Queen were playing, I was kind of stood over there. I was on the
person's playing me.
I was right on that sort of right-hand side of the stage, stood a little bit behind David Bowie and I think Sting and, and various people that were there. And he kind of looked at me. And when we got to the hotel, he was straight onto YouTube and Googled the style counts. And it was like, oh my God, you were there, weren't you? And I wouldn't say it was a vintage Style Council performance, because I think we were all really nervous. There's no doubt about it. But you got to remember, 1985, that was the year that this band with, that was Paul, me, DC Lee, Paul Weller, Mick Tolbert, Kamel Hines, Helen Turner, Steve Sonelnik. That was the kind of core of the band. We had a number one hit. We'd knocked the Dire Straits' Money, Brothers in Arms had been number one for a year, and we came in and knocked them off number one. And then we went out and we were playing. Not only were we doing Live Aid, did we do Live Aid? We went to Japan, we went to Australia, we went to America. We played festivals like Torhout and Verketer in Holland and Belgium, those two festivals, and I think there were 250,000 people at one of those gigs. They were massive, they were even bigger than the 80,000 at Live Aid, and that was with U2. I remember U2, and we'd go to Roskilde, and there'd be Blondie, and it was an incredible. That time was incredible. I mean, we and it was all done before mobile phones.
Yeah, brilliant.
You know,
so people watch the show.
They watch the show, you know, and strangest thing was that when we got to Japan, and this is kind of how kind of out there it was, and we played in Japan and we did some really big gigs because the band were big out there, and then we flew to Australia, and just before we took off, there was a very notoriously famous air crash. There was a big crash, and basically the screens went blank. We got onto our aeroplane, and just as the 10 o'clock news, you know, with Reginald Bosanquet on This Country announced at the end of the news that there had been a crash coming out of Tokyo Airport, which all of our parents were basically sat at home watching that an aeroplane had crashed. So when we got to Australia, Kenny, our tour manager, had managed to get some Aussie dollars or I don't even think it was cards, but some money so that we could all phone our parents and let them know that we were all still alive. Because that's how we communicated. You know, you didn't have a phone. But in some ways it was brilliant because when people came to the gig, they watched it.
That's absolutely incredible. So when you were playing Live Aid, then I mean, this is a big question, and I wouldn't imagine. Are you going to be able to answer this? Yeah, probably.
Sure.
What was your cymbal setup?
If it wasn't the EAK, it would have been the Earth Ride.
Yeah.
I probably can check that, and then it would have been some just A's, some like medium A's, Avedis, you know, medium 18. I think I was using a China at that point, which may have been a very early swish.
Okay, yeah, because
I love my swish knocker. Something with rivets, and just quite big cymbals. Quite, you know, to get the ride was definitely a 22. New beat hi-hats, which I loved and still, you know, love to use to this day. But I think they were probably medium, 18, 19, 20 medium Avedis Zildjians, because the Ks were really only coming back into sort of fashion at that point. They were not something that were, you know, it was Avedis Zildjians.
Yeah.
And then the first EAK. So that was something that became a little more of a choice, which I kind of remember for me was probably into the later part of the 80s, 86, 87. I went to Japan with the Jazz Renegades, my band Jazz Renegades, which is the first time that I was introduced to a young drummer. Don't know if you heard of him, called Dave Weckl.
Yeah.
And he was like the new uber hot guy.
Yeah.
And I went to see Dave do a drum clinic with Colin Schofield and was just like, oh my God, you know, this is it. You know, this guy is incredible. And he came to see us play with my little jazz Art Blakey kind of tribute thing. And I remember him coming up saying to me, like, that cymbal, you know, what is it? It's just an EAK. So it's a K. It wasn't an EAK then, it's a K. It's like, it sounds great, man, it sounds great. And I saw Dave at an event about 4 years ago, and I remember him saying to me, "Have you still got that cymbal?" So there you go. That was like, a lot of the time, as I say, that was definitely either the Earth Ride or the EAK, which I'd got from the factory. But a lot of the crashes would have just been Avedis, generally a medium, and probably 18s, 19s, and up to 20s.
Okay, so then when did you make that transition from going from the A's, which are, you know, a lot brighter than the K's, over to the K's? And
that would have been probably in the later part of the 80s into 88, 89, when, for me, things changed, you know, incredibly. Style Council were not doing as much work as we were, we'd been doing for various reasons, and I was kind of dipping in and dipping out. But all of a sudden, this thing in London exploded, this thing called acid jazz.
Okay.
So all of a sudden, I was kind of playing with, I did some stuff with Working Week. I did Galliano. I was part of the first Galliano album that Chris Bangs produced, where it was sort of samples and me playing live. And I was also working with Ian Dury. And everything at that time was just all a little bit less out there.
Yep.
So that at that point, that's when the K's really started to become that kind of warmer, darker. So that to me was, you know, I was absolutely sold. And I remember I had I used to go around. It was a lot easier, either in the car or on the tube, with a bag of cymbals and a stick bag and maybe a little house kit. And I was rehearsing with Ian Jury, and Ian had a massive Slingerland kit in his house. He had an apartment in Hammersmith, and he had a beautiful 20-inch 60s Avedis that was given to him by Nigel Olsen, that was Elton John's drummer.
Yep.
And I remember using that Avedis at Ian's place, and at the end of our rehearsal, him giving me that cymbal, saying, "You make that cymbal sound good." So that was like, I've still got that cymbal as well, that very lovely 60s Avedis. So I've still got that. And that was a cymbal that had got real patina on it. It was darker by the fact that it was old and it had been used. So the K's really became my kind of constant in that sort of acid jazz period. And then I didn't really go back to the more rocky, the rockier end, but then by that time the range had changed to have bigger, louder cymbals that were were still Ks. So when I rejoined Paul in early 1990, we'd started the conversation in 1989, and basically we started to do some gigs, and there was very few people there. And that period of time, when we started off playing at like Newport Leisure Centre and there was maybe 100 people,
wow.
In 1990, and doing the Subterranea and doing what are they're now O2s, but they were called different things there, but small clubs and small audiences. That period of time started in 1990, when we only had a record deal in Japan, because we didn't have a record deal in the UK, so we'd go over to Japan and just play a lot out there. And then that period of time was a period of 7 years where we went from playing to 80, 90, 100 people to playing Don Valley, to playing Crystal Palace, to playing Finsbury Park 2-3 nights, just massive Victoria Park, headlining these, headlining this festival, that festival. And what really happened was that as the gigs got bigger, and when we went to see Pulp the other night at the Co-op Arena, and one of the boys said, "Have you ever played a venue this big, Dad?" And it was like, and my wife Sally kind of goes, "Oh, it's like we were doing 5 nights at the MEN or the GMEX as it was called then. They've all changed their names, and they're the Co-op and the Spa Arena and whatever. But GMEX, we would do 4 or 5 nights at these places, and Earl's Court, and it was massive. It was absolutely massive.
And did you find that? Now I don't know if this is necessarily a rule, so let me know. The bigger the venue, the bigger the cymbals.
Well, especially when you're doing festivals, because you just need a little bit of, need a bit of weight. And Steve Smith, who I absolutely adore, speaks very eloquently about the whole transition of playing in bigger venues, when you've got to think about that person right at the back of the arena.
Yeah.
Paul was never one for splash cymbals and the little bits and the fiddly stuff. He was never really one for that. And there was a kind of a little bit of an experimental sort of time, but it was generally the darker cymbals that I would use, especially in recording. And then when we would go out live, obviously at a certain point it was bigger venues, it was the 8,000-9,000s, and then the festivals, which we would do all over the summer. So everything would go a little bigger. At one point towards the end, I was using a 24-inch a 24-inch ride and 15-inch Master Sound hi-hats, which made a bit of a racket.
Yeah,
maybe a little bit sort of too much, but then I kind of pulled back. But the thing for me is now with the paper thin crashes, I just adore those, and lucky enough to have a little palette of different sizes. But I think they're beautiful cymbals, and now, as we're kind of talking through, what you expect or what you want from a range, I can put up something like one of the 21-inch paper thins and have it in a position where I can crush it, but also ride it if I want a kind of a washier type of ride. And I'm really into that idea now. And that is an older sort of take, is that in the 60s and the 50s, cymbals were not ride cymbals, or they were just cymbals, and you went with the weight. And Zildjian have done that, going with when the Caropes came out the first time, and the Avedis, where they just had a weight. So if you wanted an 18-inch cymbal and you want to use it as a ride cymbal, you maybe go for a slightly heavier model.
Yep.
I love that. That's what I'm kind of really into now. That's what I've really evolved to having a choice of sounds. And I don't use a big setup now in terms of drums or cymbals. I use cymbals that I can really rely on, that I know are gonna record well, because that's a lot of the stuff that I'm doing now is studio. And then I have my very simple drum setup, which is, if I'm in and out of different studios, it's simple for me. And then I have this kind of additional little bit of icing on the cake, which is my snare drum selection. And I'm very particular about, the snare drums that I use. So really, I have kind of almost moved into almost like a jazz sensibility about what I'm choosing, and the kind of cymbals that I'm looking for. That's what I'm really kind of looking, to have that matched complementary setup, a little bit like Bill Stewart, those kind of players. So everything works well together. That's where my ear is at. So I'm making the most of my little orchestra, 22, 13, 16, and one of my vintage or lovely snare drums that I use.
I was just about to ask as well, when you do like a studio thing, does the EAK or the Earthride, do you ever look into your bag and think, oh, do you know what, that'll work today?
Yes, I do. The Earthride I have taken and tried. It doesn't work that well for a lot of situations, but the EAK really does. And for me, I like my current cymbal setup. Apart from the paper thins that you've introduced me to, has been pretty consistent for about 8-10 years now. Yeah. I know some drummers like to keep changing things up. That's not really what I like to do. It's very. I like to know that I can rely on what I've actually got. Yeah. You've given me some fantastic cymbals. Well,
I was just about to say, what was
the 22?
What was the
custom drive?
Yeah, that's it.
That's pretty much, since we did that filming, that has been my ride cymbal. That's been my go-to ride. So no, I've got to thank you for that. You really have a good ear, especially for the cymbals that I've chosen. Most of them have come through you. So that's a really.
I literally cannot believe that Steve White is sat here saying that to me.
It's true, because we did some filming, didn't we? And we went through the K range, and a couple of those did not end up coming back anywhere. And that 22.
Yeah, whenever I come to your place, I'm always going back short-handed.
Slightly short-handed, but that 22 has been since that session we did a few years ago. That's been my go-to. And I like, and I have a couple of the K Cons K Constantinoples, which I will augment the setup with. It was really when I did the DC Lee tour, I did a thing at ACM in Guildford, and one of our former colleagues, Bob Vichlin, was there, and he was doing a little chat about cymbals, and he had one of the. Do you know what? It's like almost looks like an experimental cymbal.
Oh, the FX.
FX. Yeah. And I was like, man, that is a great sound, and that's so not me. Yeah. And Bob said, look, if you want to try it, take it. So when I went out on the road with DC Lee last year, and we did the UK tour, I had the FX cymbal where I would have my swish knocker.
Did you play that night when I came to see you?
Yeah.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. So I had that with an inverted ice bell, the Cymbal thing.
I wondered what that cymbal was.
It sounded beautiful, and it was perfect for Dee's thing, where it's tight. It's not loads of crashing. It's all groove. It's all sort of it's soulful.
Yeah, it's great.
And having that as a to kind of just tap into was really not me, but I loved it. So I do intertwine that combination of the bell and the FX cymbal, and then the swish knocker, which goes back to my kind of love of Buddy Rich, and and Louis Belson used to use one, and I'm very traditional in that kind of way. But that cymbal, I mean, I don't know how long I've had that swish knocker.
Oh man,
forever.
Yeah.
And people say to me, now, it's only got like X amount of rivets in. It's got like 8 rivets in, and it should have. Have you taken out those 4? It's like, no, they've just fell out. But it still sounds good. I mean, I just love that cymbal. It's a beautiful cymbal.
So, just coming back to the drumming side of things, and I've always been infatuated with this song because of something you did.
Yeah.
Did you realise when you recorded Changing Man that the double stroke fill,
30-second stroke snare drum roll?
Did you realise that would be something that drummers resonate with?
No, I didn't. And I got to, I have to say a massive thank you to Paul for those allowing me to kind of be that sort of creative and experimental. Because those first 3 albums, Paul Weller, the first album, Wildwood, and then Stanley Road, and then to a certain degree Heavy Soul. I mean, I got to put a lot of stuff in there that drummers don't get to put in, and it was welcomed, and it was like, yeah, that's really cool. And the original thing about Changing Man is that it's no great secret. It came from a sample. It was Paul and Brendan would write using samples off of records, and sometimes you'd get to clear the sample. So that is a sample from an ELO record that we originally did our demo to. And because it was done to a sample on an old Akai, with an old Akai sampler, everything had to be tight. You can't be, splashing and crashing on it. So everything had to be really tight. And what I think what Paul liked about the groove was that the hi-hats are quarter notes. It's not eighth notes. It's just quarter notes. Very, very simple. It just kind of keeps that sort of real consistency about it. And then the bass drum is actually quite syncopated. There's a lot of 16th notes that are going on within that bass drum pattern. Backbeat fairly solid, but what he wanted was something that kind of lifted and was a little bit of a departure from the guitar riff. And at first I was doing 16th notes, and he was like, it's not quite there. And then, because I'd been practicing a lot with Bob Armstrong, I went to 32nd notes, and with a lot of it's with no cymbal crashes coming out of the, back to the hi-hat again. And Brendan and Paul and Max, they were like, yeah, that's it. So that's how it came. It was a lot of encouragement and a lot of demoing and a lot of seeing how it works. And that's the same as what happened with Sunflower and all of those great, those tunes I was able to sort of play on. And I mean, there's a song called Fifth Season that I really love the drumming on that one. And it's a bit of a Ray Charles kind of, it goes to a bit of a Ray Charles thing. And then coming back into one of the verses, I remember Paul saying to me, I want something really big, And we were listening at the time to Spectrum by Billy Cobham.
Okay,
And he just said to me, one of those big F-off fills that Billy Cobham does, do one of them. And I managed to get a big, and no one was getting to do that stuff at that point. So it was such a creative time. It was brilliant. And it is lovely because still, to this day, I mean, it's fair old time ago, but Changing Man is one of the great books for RSL. It's still there.
I did it when I was at ACM.
So still, younger drummers, which I love, is like, my dad's a big fan, but I've been doing Changing Man on the. And
yeah, but do you know what? The thing that's beautiful about that record is that it shows that simplicity can sound massive. Yeah. And that's what I like you say, quarter notes on the hats.
Yeah.
Fairly syncopated kick drum, and that incredible double stroke roll just sets it right off.
I always say, if people, I mean, obviously this goes against the sort of grain of of where the music industry is going.
Yeah, but you've got to play all the notes,
all at the time, with as many hands and feet as possible. But if you was to say, what has brought me most success, and we're talking about success, without it being a dirty word financially as well, is I'm talking about Long Hot Summer. which is a ballad.
Yep.
I'm talking about Broken Stones, where I'm
Yeah,
barely playing
yeah.
anything on. I'm talking about You Do Something to Me,
Yep.
which was the early American K and a radio king. So basically, Wildwood, the song Wildwood, these are all, You're the Best Thing, these are all ballads. They're all massive ballads. And if over the years, if it's not drummers, or if it would be a producer or another musician that employs you, generally they will talk about the ballads and say, oh, I loved what you did on that particular song. So that's a little lesson, kids. I know it's great, but just try and sometimes just play the song.
I mean, Broken Stones, that's just a
it's
a
rim shot.
Stick, isn't it?
It's a rim shot with a bass drum on the first two eighth notes of the bar and eighth note hi-hats, and that's all it does. It's just that's all it is.
Incredible record. That is an incredible drumming track as well.
But that was definitely one that Paul said to me, "This is all I want. I just want you to do this."
Yeah, and it makes the record.
And there is a demo of us playing Broken Stones with a backbeat.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a more like soul kind of thing, but it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So, and it is, a little bit of a nod to the kind of drumming that Kenny Jones did at the start of Tin Soldier, the rim shot kind of thing. So yeah, there was a lot of that kind of thing. But that's when I did that, I went, that's what I want on that. And that's great. That's it. You're the boss.
So we've talked about your sort of Live Aid setup and how we got into the Ks. Now, are you still at a place where if you go and do a studio session, is there still a mixture of stuff that goes on? You got your swish knocker, you love your new beats, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
A's and K's, or is it mainly a K thing now?
At the moment, if I'm using, as I say, 90% of the time I'm using the 22-inch K ride. That kind of goes in as the staple. The standard. Generally now, I will have a second ride set up to the left, where a crash cymbal might usually be above the hi-hat, and that tends to be a crash ride. Right. So I might ride on that, or I might crash on that.
But nothing too bright?
Nothing too bright. It's still going to have a lot of stick definition. If it's a crash cymbal, for the last couple of years, it will be from the paper thin, the K paper thins, and it's going to be a 20 or a 2021, which is I absolutely love those cymbals. I have been experimenting recently with a second ride to the right of my 22. And I've been using something a little, with a little more definition, just to kind of change it up. Again, that's been an influence of listening to drummers like Steve Smith and the great Bill Stewart with that kind of alternate ride cymbal that on the right. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I mean, I've just done an album with a brilliant young singer-songwriter called Luca May, and that was all done without click tracks. It was done with the band in the room, Luca doing singing with us.
Without click tracks, you're a walking click track.
Yeah, I am the click track, and that was like, to me, that was heaven. That was heaven. And I brought out it was the 22, a couple of the paper thins, and I brought out for that session a couple of pairs of very old Avedis, early 60s Avedis, because it had that patina, that sort of
that nice washy
aged,
sound, lovely chick to it.
Yeah, and they kind of work for that because it's a very soulful record. So I'm looking forward to that coming out because that was an absolute pleasure to do.
Okay, and what are we here to do today?
Well, I'm very exciting. I start work on the Christmas special for the Madame Blanc series that I've done with my partner Chris Haig. We've done the music for the last 4 years since lockdown. We're on to series 4, and 25th of June for the dates. It's that's going on to Netflix, which is all very exciting. So we've done 4 series of that, and we're working on the Christmas special, and then Chris and I are going to be working on a solo album, which I've already started. I've been asked to make a solo record, which the plan is, I won't jinx it by saying too much more, but we've written 10, 11 songs for the solo record, and the remit for the solo record is something a little more like a traditional Blue Note influenced record, and some of the more sort of soulful, funky Hammond organ kind of records that came out with Gene Ammons and Richard Groove Holmes. So we're working on that at the moment, and I wanted to have almost like a signature sound to it. I wanted some matched cymbals, because I want to make it quite overhead heavy. I want to make like those records were, even though it might have a backbeat, like Idris Muhammad, where you're really hearing a lot of the top kind of kit. So I wanted to sort of check out some new sounds for that. And then I wanted to be able to say, because there's talk of live shows next year, is to take those sounds out live.
Okay. So
there's almost like a signature sound. And then I've got my Freddie G Drum Academy, the 25th Freddie G Drum Academy, that I'm going on to with George Frederick and Greg Bissonette, Craig Blundell, Vince Dunn, Eddie Thrower, Pat Garvey, Holly Prest, Neil Wilkinson. There's a whole bunch of people coming down to do it.
That's quite a lineup.
That's quite a lineup, which is amazing. Going strong I can't believe we're going strong. So that happens in August, and then the album we've started on. Then we'll start work on some more TV stuff, and then hopefully the next series of Madame Blanc will start filming early next year. And in the meantime, I'll go out and do some live shows to promote this record. So, because I've kind of got the bug, I just want. I went to, obviously, been going out to see a few things this year, and I'm sort of feeling the urge to go out and get out the studio and break out after Dee's tour, which was amazing. I really had a brilliant time. I'd be really, I quite fancy going out and doing.
Get the sticks out of mothballs and off we go.
Well, they're never not out of mothballs, but it's just studios. I was at Abbey Road yesterday, and I was in at Woods Lodge Studios last week, and then I was up to Foxden in Sheffield. That's all been in the last 7 days. So it's like constantly. I've got a kit in Sheffield, and I'm constantly working, but it's just in a different way, and I love it. But I do feel the urge to come and visit some of my friends in Italy. I want to go back out to Italy to do some live shows and drink some good wines, and then I've got an urge to go back to Japan again. I really would like to go and see my friends in Japan again. So hopefully, if this record comes off, then it's something I might be able to get to do next year. And
these cymbals are going to be the sound. The cymbals we're about to pick.
It's kind of what I want. I'm going to get myself a nice, sturdy, vault to be able to and have the make EasyJet have to look after them if we fly EasyJet. But I want to kind of be that drummer with my taking my cymbals
with the rolling vault.
With the rolling vault.
Looks
that's
great.
it. That's what I want to do.
That's excellent. Well, let's go and pick the cymbals. Big thank you to Stephen for coming.
Pleasure.
Thanks, man.
Talk all day.
Really appreciate it. Yeah, we could.
And I've got to say,
we do.
Yeah, we do, and we are. But thank you for all your support and help. It's been truly appreciated.
It's a pleasure. You're a hero of mine, so it's a pleasure. Steve White, let's go and pick your cymbals.
Thank you.
They're perfectly, man.
Beautiful. Very happy.
Yeah?
Lovely, mate. Thank you.
Oh, pleasure. So there you go. The three cymbals picked. We've got a 19-inch K Constantinople Crash Ride, 20-inch K Constantinople Medium Thin Ride Low, and a 22-inch K Constantinople Ride Medium Thin Low. And I think they're pretty well matched, don't you?
They sound gorgeous. Thank you.
Pleasure as always.
Pub.